Bismillah, walhamdulillah, wa sallallahu wa sallam wa barik ala nabiyyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa ashabihi ajma'een. My dear brothers and sisters in Islam, alhamdulillah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the best of planners, Shaykhan. Many of us be planning things. Some of us are successful at the things we plan. But in most cases, when we don't achieve those things, we succumb to the best of planners. That's the plan of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So it's only by His fadl and His mercy that we sit amongst each other today as brothers in Islam in the gathering for the purpose of reminding one another of that which is pleasing to Allah, and reminding one another to abstain from that which angers Allah. And whenever you sit in a gathering, such as this gathering here, the Malaika, the most obedient of creation, they supplicate for the believers who sit in this type of majlis. So inshallah ta'ala, before I begin, I want to thank the brothers and Master Tawheed for inviting me here, because it's from the Sunnah Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam that we thank the people. But the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, he mentioned, if you do not thank the people, then you have to thank Allah. And I also want to thank you brothers for being patient with me, because I know many of you were in attendance in the original day, but as I mentioned in the beginning, Allah is the best of planners. But whatever it is, we were prevented from, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bestow it upon us tonight, inshallah. So the brother mentioned, I go by the name of Amir Junaid Muhaddith, formerly known to many of y'all, maybe some of y'all, maybe none of y'all, knows Loon from Bad Boy Records. I was known for my extensive career in the music business with people the likes of Sean Combs, Snoop Dogg, Missy Elliott. There's an array, a plethora of names that I could mention that will solidify what Allah ordained for me in the business that many of the youth, Muslim and non-Muslim, continue to be intrigued by. But I sit before you today as an example that lifestyle and everything that comes with it is a complete opposition of everything good that ordained by Allah and His Messenger sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And because of that fact, I sit amongst you as your brother in Islam, and not as a non-Muslim rapper continuing to contribute to a lifestyle where many of us around the world are losing our children. So what I'm about to tell you today, hopefully inshallah, is a means for you to understand that it's a mercy from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He continues to guide people to Islam. And there's two things we should keep in mind. Whenever Allah guides someone to Islam, the first and the most beneficial and the most rewarding is that it reminds us of the favor of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And when He guides someone to Islam, sometimes what it does, it increases us in Iman. It increases us in wanting, or that zeal, or that need to do the things that are pleasing to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But the second thing is a fearful thing. Meaning that when Allah guides someone to Islam, it's a possibility that Allah has guided this person to Islam to replace someone who is negligent with their Islam. So it's important to understand these things. So for myself, I was born and raised in the streets of Harlem. I grew up at a time when we had, which many of you may know, the crack epidemic. And when crack cocaine hit the streets, it destroyed communities. at a pace that still to this day is unfathomable. I'm talking about good communities, good people, who only strove to do that which is good for their families. When this drug crept in, there was an influx and spike of violence, rape, murder, everything that's unspeakable in Islam. And being exposed to this environment, growing up, our options and our choices were very limited. It was either we were going to make it in sports and entertainment, or we were going to choose the streets. It was really that simple. And the majority of us, based on the circumstances that surrounded us, we fell victim of the streets. Which leads to my reason of why I'm here. Wallahi, I'm invested in the youth. Because I believe that your generation, you're the last hope for this ummah. This ummah Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, whether you know it or not, it rests on your shoulders. And as your elder, and I believe many of the elders in the community are trying as hard as they can to contribute to aid and assisting you in the responsibility, whether you know it or not, it's going to be resting on your shoulders. So it's important for us to understand a few things so we can prepare ourselves for what's yet to come. So by show of hands, inshallah, how many of y'all in here was born and raised Muslim? Allahu Akbar. How many such as myself been guided to this blessed deen of Islam? Alhamdulillah. So as you can see, as I mentioned, Allah is the best of planners. Doesn't matter if you were born and raised Muslim, doesn't matter if you were raised, nurtured, and cultivated upon Tawheed, or you was guided to the blessed deen from darkness and ignorance. We all sit amongst each other right now as brothers in Islam. So I just wanted to establish that so we know. All the differences about who came to Islam, who was born Muslim, that goes out the window, yeah. And the reason why I asked you to show your hands so you can see for yourself. So you don't have to hear me say it, and you don't have the other brothers to tell you as well. You saw yourself. The vast majority of us in here are born and raised Muslim, and the very few of us was guided to the blessed deen. How many of y'all, by showing hands, were raised by both your parents? How many love? This is another favor from Allah. How many was raised by a single parent? Allah rewards your parent for taking responsibility for two parents. And how many such as myself was raised with no parents? Alhamdulillah. Wallahi, this is the first. I had this lonely hand at this whole trip I've been in the UK. Alhamdulillah. I'm not going to say it's good to see somebody else raised with no parents, but alhamdulillah. So yeah. So my grandparents raised me. I met my father when I was 33. He wasn't ever around. Good dude. He just showed the streets. Became a victim of it. A lot of people became a victim of him. My mom's as well. My mom's is like my sister. Understand? I sold drugs with my mother, used drugs with my mother. I did everything with my mother like she was my sister. My grandmother was my mother. And this was common where I came from. But it's not normal. It's not normal yet. Even looking at the majority of people that raised their hand that had both their parents. Y'all like superheroes where I come from. Some of the youth that I grew up with, out of sheer jealousy and envy, would probably harm you because you have both your parents. Out of jealousy. And many of y'all, you don't have to expose your shortcomings or your sins. Y'all take your parents for granted. But I know kids that would look at you, wiping your mother kisses off and pushing your father back and all of that type of stuff because they're showing you affection and look at you and want to hurt you. But you're taking something for granted that they never had. It's very important, Yaquan, that we remain grateful for the countless favors that Allah bestowed upon us. Because I know a lot of times we forget. Because we anticipate receiving certain favors from Allah that we pray for every day. Every day you as a Jew, you asking Allah for this one thing, this one thing, this one thing. But countless favors and bounties from Allah have reached you, and a lot of us are very grossly negligent in showing gratitude for those favors. One is waking up. One is waking up. One is being able to physically have the capability to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. One is the opportunity to be better than you was yesterday. Because every time you wake up, you have an opportunity to be better than you were yesterday. Alhamdulillah. So inshallah, I'm going to tell y'all how I became Muslim. Hopefully this reminder, inshallah, will inspire those who raise their hands, born and raised Muslim. Hopefully it inspire you to look at yourself and look at what Allah has given you and increase your gratitude for what Allah has given you, because Allah raised you amongst believers. You were conceived by believers. You were placed under security that no one could provide but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the extension of that security, you have both your parents. So hopefully this story will inspire you to look at that and be grateful. And also for those of us who have been guided to this religion, that we not take that for granted. Because had we died in the state that we were in, we would be spending eternity in the hellfire. And all of the little things that we accomplished in the dunya would be meaningless. It would be insignificant to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So hopefully this story inspires you as well, inshallah. So as I mentioned, I used to be an artist on Bad Boy Records. I'm going to start from there. But going back into the street is just unnecessary. This is what we try to get away from. I'd rather start from a place that I know inspires cultures all around the world. Let's be honest. Whether you're Muslim or non-Muslim, it's the music goodness that got a lot of y'all, doing things that basically you wasn't raised upon. And also you have social media as well that also contributes to you getting too much information to rehearse things that, once again, you wasn't raised upon. So I'm going to tell you that being in the music business, I thought was an escape from the street. Remember what I said, you were making it sports and entertainment, and for us, that was an escape from the harsh reality that we lived in the streets. So when I made it in the music business, I thought I escaped something. I thought I made it. Everybody around me made me feel like I made it. Everybody was happy that I made it. But in all actuality, I went from the streets to something that was magnified. It was the streets magnified. So everything that I acquired in that business, all the money, all the cars, everything, the more I increased in these things, the more I started losing pieces of myself. I started to lose pieces of myself. And to substitute the pieces that I lost, I would buy more stuff. Every time I lost something, I tried to replace it with something else that was only contributing to my sickness. It gets to a point, Yaquan, when you get to a certain level where you acquire so much money, so much fame, that you start to become a vampire. Meaning you live vicariously through people who don't have this stuff. So for example, I might come through in a new car. It ain't nothing to me, I'm used to this stuff. But one of y'all might see it and get excited. Like, yo, he got the brand new. Now, I need to live vicariously through you in order to know what that feels like. So I might go to the extent of letting you get in the car and ride with me just to look at your excitement. Or I might even go far enough to give you the keys and let you drive and be looking at you, like a stalker. Because you're happy about something I can't seem to get happy about no more. You understand? It's a Lamborghini to you, but it's a Toyota to me. I remember there's times people used to walk up and talk to my watch. You ain't even talking to me. Yo, I heard you got that new jump. I was like, yo, this is just getting unbearable. And you start doing things to adjust. I'm just gonna put on a rubber watch. Maybe nobody cares. I'm just going to G-Shock. It's like, you see something else. And that's when you start realizing you are object of other people's entertainment. You're subjected to everybody else's validation. And this is exactly what y'all falling into with social media, and we're going to get to that later. But when you get to a point where you're losing parts of yourself, and the only way you can replace any joy or happiness is when you're extracting it from somebody who looks at what you got like it's something that is meaningful, when in all actuality is insignificant. And then also, living under umbrella of a very powerful and influential person like Sean Combs, that adds another layer of stress on top of you. Because I've already acquired my own success, but I'm still under the umbrella of somebody who has a cloud following him. That's a lot for a kid in his 20s. Didn't matter what my bank account looked like, didn't matter what I was driving. That's a lot for a kid coming from the hood that only had a certain expectation of what it was to escape that reality, and I achieved way more than I expected. And what I achieved, like I said, I watched pieces of myself start to disappear. I started to become miserable. I started to become depressed. I started to become agitated. I started to become frustrated with people. And this is where y'all start to depict some of these artists as arrogant and all that. But in all actuality, these are human beings only acting out of just emotion, of being overwhelmed all the time. So you might catch him on a bad day, you don't want to sign up, and he's like, yeah, they're human. But if they don't comply, then you're a sucker. So that's when you start realizing you're subjected to the people. You're subjected to the people. Then you're subjected to the business. Radio station invite me, I don't show up, they don't play my record. But to everybody else, it look like you got everything, but you become subjected to the game. You locked in now. This is what you thought you wanted. This is what you get now. You get everything that you didn't want. Only thing you wanted was the money, but you gotta take everything else. You can't have a little bit and leave everything else off. You gotta take all or nothing. And that's what everything. Even the law asks us, commands us in the Quran to enter Islam completely. Not one foot in, not one foot out, not halfway, completely. Meaning with a sincere heart, pure intention, statement of the tongue, action of the limbs, all of those things completely in Islam. So when things got this overwhelming, people started dying, I started catching more cases in the music business than I did in the street. When I was in the street, yeah, I got arrested a gang of times, but I beat a lot of cases. But when I got in the music business, I caught more cases in the music business than I did in the street. In the music business, I got arrested for attempted murder, kidnapping, aggravated assault, all kinds of things because people seen Loon doing all of these girl songs but really didn't look at the label. They didn't look at the headline. It said Loon. They don't say Pretty Boy Valentine or Smooth Cat, Wedding Singer. Like, I was just doing radio records because That is what got me rich. But I found myself auditioning all over again for a life I thought I left behind. Now I'm in the music business, putting in work because people thinking they know me because they seen a video. They think they know me because they heard a song. And they making bad decisions, and I'm making bad decisions with them. And then a lot of it came from wearing the label of bad boy. So now let me start with my journey. I left bad boy. And I saw that I went out on a mission to prove to myself and the world that I could do this by myself. I don't need nobody. I could go out there and do this by myself. I wrote all the Puff Hot records anyway, so I could do it by myself. I wrote 51 top 10 hits, sold over 7 million records. I could do this by myself. I don't really need that machine. This was my mentality. This was my ego at the time. But what I started to run into was something totally different than what I was pursuing. And the first thing that affected me is when I visited a place called Senegal. How many of y'all am I showing here where Senegal is? It's right in West Africa. The first slave houses ever built in a place called Goriana. I went to Senegal and performed there as normal, indulging in all the things that I used to as normal. But look at the law. I had a little bit of free time. Somebody told me about Goriana. I said, I'm gonna go down there. Yeah, I'll check it out. No problem. Not knowing what was about to happen. So I go to visit Goriana. And it was a guy that was giving a tour. He had a whole bunch of, Caucasian people, seemed like they was guilty for whatever their parents did or their ancestors did. They just looked crazy. They was taking them around, and it was like SeaWorld. He had on a button-up shirt with a tie. Like, just come this way. I'm like, yo, I don't want him to tell me what's going on in that junk. I need somebody a little bit more thorough. So I happened to, I seen a man that was standing on the side. He just looked like he knew. He looked like he knew everything I needed to know. So I say, yo, you know what took place in here? He said, absolutely, I know what took place in here. I said, well, when these people get out of the way, man, I want you to take me over and show me what happened. So he takes me up in there, and he starts showing me the whole system of how they had this whole, enslavement thing working. This was a business. It was actually a reflection of how we used to run spots, in the street. I was like, this is crazy. They moving stuff from here to there. It looked too much like, business. It looked like something that had anything to do with human beings. So as he took me around, I was getting more and more like, upset and angry because as an African American, y'all might not know. I'm pretty sure some of y'all are descendants of Africans here. Whether you're Muslim, non-Muslim, you know what it is, We latch on to our ancestry, our heritage, that's all we got. Because everything else been taken away from us. So as I'm going through this journey, I'm just getting more and more frustrated and angry. I'm ready to go back and just hurt somebody that looked like somebody that might have did something to somebody. So he's explained to me, he said, look, 60 million slaves came through here. He said, but 6 million never left the soil. He said, they fought and they died. I'm like, there must have been some real killers, something. He said, nah. He said, they were Muslim. So what does that mean? He said, the 6 million that fought and died, they would not submit to the will of no one other than Allah. They fought and they died upon that. At that moment, Ikhwan, I didn't care about the first black man that made the shoe, the first black man that made the iron, the first black man that made the street light. All of that stuff that I used to hold on to that gave me a sense of dignity and pride, all of that went out the window. You know why? Because these 6 million people died for God. They ain't died for no skin color. They died for God. Now, what's more noble than that? What's more courageous than that?